Hi everyone, just wanted to share a few items from last week. I'll apologize in advance. I don't feel terribly well today. Had a small health issue yesterday and not feeling great. So I'll probably try and keep this brief, and you don't get to see me today, so you just get to hear me. Um, so last week we went over data privacy and some elements of the law and regulation as related to specifically we talked about HIPAA because that, as I think I had mentioned in our synchronous session, it's not that particularly we, that we only care about HIPAA. We care about all kinds of legal and regulatory information, but we could spend time talking about all kinds of laws. But HIPAA is one that really does impact almost every specialty in healthcare administration that you may end up going into. So you could work in operations, you could work in in billing or in finance. You could work in patient safety and quality. You could work in compliance. You can work in IT, HR. Almost every area you have to deal with HIPAA, as opposed to some of the other regulations that impact you generally, but not specifically. So it's a good one. If we're going to dig into a regulation, it's probably a good one to take a look at. So hopefully I won't belabor the HIPAA discussion because we did review that in our discussion board and in um, our synchronous session. But if you do have any other questions, please just let me know. I'm happy to discuss that. The one thing I did want to mention, though, out of the discussion board was about encryption of data specifically, and um, what is the right answer there? And I don't think there is a right answer. There's part of me that thinks that why wouldn't we just require providers to encrypt data? It's silly to not require that, but there's because at this point most providers, with the exception of very very small physician practices, most providers are at a point technologically where I think that they could manage um, a moderate data encryption system to when dealing with things like emailing, etc. There's decent technology help out there um, that you can get in order to you don't have to have IT staff on site or anything like that. You can buy these plug and play systems, but I think the issue with saying okay, everyone has to have encryption um, capabilities is that it's no different than the current HIPAA security regulations, which say, okay, everyone has to do all of these other different things, like even something as simple as a baseline risk assessment, which many people have ignored and not done. So I don't know that requiring people to encrypt data is going to solve the problem because some people will do it and some people won't. And those that will do it, and others will simply just continue to ignore it. And without an aggressive tact at um, uh, enforcement, I don't think it's going to fix the problem. So um, I think probably doing more enforcement on the security regulations and making sure people are protecting access, controlling access to systems, access to data, would make more sense than requiring people to use encryption. Because there may be people that simply don't require it. It just would make more sense um, to make sure they're controlling access to data points. So enough about that. Let's talk about the quiz questions. There's a few here, so I'll just go over these quickly. So the first one was enacted laws are typically blank, which makes rulemaking blank. So enacted laws are typically vague, is the answer, which makes rulemaking critical. We talked about this last week or the week before, I think, too, when we were actually talking more about the law itself. And now we're talking about how critical the rulemaking process is, or the regulatory aspects. But so when they pass a law like HIPAA, HIPAA was passed in '96, and it was vague. It said protect data, keep data confidential. That was about it. It was very vague. So that's why the regulatory process, that rulemaking process, is so critical so that we know exactly what we have to do as an industry to um, to meet those requirements. So the laws themselves are very vague, and then finally in 2005, almost 10 years um, after the passage of the law, 10 years later, we were finally implementing the HIPAA security guidelines. So it's a lengthy process at times, and there are still aspects of HIPAA, the HIPAA administrative simplification, that have not been implemented. So it doesn't mean that everything that's in a law ever even gets enacted, because you need to have regulatory elements in order to enact those vague laws like that. Okay, next one. Which of the following statements about rulemaking is false? So I won't read through them all, but the one that is false is implementing agencies cannot decide to undertake rulemaking without legislative action. And that is false. Implementing agencies can undertake rulemaking without legislative action. So they do that all the time. We've talked about this process quite a bit, where an agency like the Department of Health and Human Services can move forward and kind of make their own their regulations, so there, or rules, a proposed rule and a final rule, but they're not necessarily, there's no new law to back those up. They can move forward and create these regulations, and the reason that they are considered enforceable, just like a law or a statute, is through the rulemaking process. The fact that there's a proposed rule, and then they are given a comment period, so we all have the time to comment, just like that RFI that we commented on um, in an assignment, or you could send your comments, but in the assignment, um, and then um, and then they produce a final rule. So that process creates the same type of situation that occurs in legislation, where we have the ability to speak to our lawmakers as citizens and give them our advice, and then they work to create legislation. So it mimics that process. I actually think that the rulemaking process gives more input from experts than the legislative process, but that's my own personal thought on that. But yeah, so implementing agencies can certainly move forward and undertake rulemaking without legislative action having occurred. Okay, next one, true false. In the federal rulemaking process, OMB reviews both draft proposed rules and final rules. And OMB is the Office of Management and Budget. And in your textbook, and I unfortunately don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember the page number, but there's a figure in there in our chapter for this week, and it lists out the whole process, the federal rulemaking process, in like a chart. And you'll see in there how the proposed rule will go to OMB, and then the proposed rule will go, and then the final rule will go as well. So that answer to that is true. Throughout that process, they always will go to OMB for a review and approval there. So that's all I have. If you have any questions or issues on anything, please let me know. This week we're writing a policy brief. If you've never written a policy brief, it's not a difficult form of writing at all. I actually like writing policy briefs because they're very straightforward, concise. There's not a lot of flowery or superfluous writing in them, which tends to be the way I write. So that's good for me. but it's kind of a straightforward and concise way to detail out information about a topic and potential policy implications for that topic. So you'll have the ability to go in, look at, um, choose a topic out of the information provided, look at maybe some existing policy on that topic, and then give some recommendations on what you think can be done moving forward on that topic. So hopefully you'll find it an interesting process. I did give a few websites there. If you haven't written a policy brief or haven't done anything like that in the past, um, I think you'll be okay. I saw your white paper memo writing from last week, and everyone did well on that. So I think um, you're good at writing in a concise format, and it's similar to that. Just kind of writing in that more concise format than a more formal, um, kind of flowery writing that we do more for like a research paper. This needs to be a little more direct and concise. But I think you'll all do well. But if you do have questions or want more additional resources, I'm sure I can find some more for you as well, or examples. Please just let me know, and I'll try and point you in the right direction. Um, but that's all I have, and I will be talking to everyone this week. Okay, thanks so much.